The soft patter of rain against the window echoed through the dimly lit apartment, each droplet reflecting the golden glow of Paris at night. The city was breathtaking, a masterpiece of light and shadow, but to Carlot Sinclair, it was nothing more than a labyrinth of cobblestone streets and unreachable dreams. He stood in his penthouse, watching the traffic flow like scattered stars along the Champs-Élysées. On the nearby table, a gilded invitation lay in the glow of the lamplight, an exclusive entry to an art exhibition at the Musée d'Orsay, featuring the most promising young artists of the year. Carlot picked up the invitation, running his fingers over the embossed lettering. A part of him wanted to go, to lose himself in the world of art, to be surrounded by canvases that spoke louder than words ever could. But a stronger part resisted. He could command a boardroom filled with the city's most ruthless investors, could transform abstract blueprints into architectural marvels, yet he couldn't hold a simple conversation with a woman without feeling awkward. His solitude was not a choice, it was a fortress he had built, brick by brick, to protect himself. A soft breeze from the open window ruffled the invitation, making it flutter slightly. Carlot exhaled, reaching for his long black coat. A night at the museum wouldn't change who he was, but at the very least, it would pull him out of the silence of these walls, if only for a few hours. The cool stone steps of Musée d'Orsay pressed against Carlot's palm as he ran his fingers lightly over the wrought iron railing. The air inside carried the scent of oil paint, aged paper, and the faint trace of expensive perfume from elegantly dressed guests. He moved slowly through the exhibition halls, letting himself be absorbed in the world of art. But even surrounded by masterpieces, he still felt out of place, like a wanderer who didn't quite belong. And then he saw it. A large painting, its brush strokes bold yet heartbreakingly quiet. It depicted a solitary man, lost amidst the grandeur of Paris. The interplay of light and shadow cast his face in a haunting glow, as if he were merely a fleeting presence in a world that moved on without him. Carlot stopped. He didn't notice Lena Moreau standing just a few feet away, camera in hand. She had been watching him for a while, the man who looked at the painting as if he saw his own reflection in it. There was something about him that drew her in, an unspoken connection between subject and observer. Without hesitation, Lena raised her camera and clicked the shutter. The quiet snap of the camera echoed softly in the still air. Carlot heard it. He turned, his gaze locking onto hers just as she lowered the camera. A flicker of guilt flashed across her face, like she had been caught doing something she shouldn't, but instead of slipping away, she took a step back and immediately collided into him. For a brief second, neither of them moved. Carlot instinctively steadied her, his hand closing around her wrist. Her skin was warmer than he expected, and for those few fleeting moments, time seemed to freeze. "Who is she?" Lena looked up at him, her green eyes reflecting the museum lights. A small, knowing smile curved her lips, not apologetic, not nervous, just quietly amused. I'm sorry," Carlot stammered, quickly letting go of her. Lena tilted her head slightly, her smile deepening. "No need to apologize, you were lost in thought. Art has a way of doing that to people, doesn't it?" Carlot had no idea how to respond. This was his first conversation of the night, and it came from an unexpected accident. But instead of feeling uncomfortable, he felt oddly at ease. "Is it your painting?" he asked, gesturing toward the artwork. Lena let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "I wish I could say yes, but no. I'm just an observer, like you." Carlot hesitated before asking, "And the photo you just took?" Lena tilted her head, studying him carefully. "I don't photograph appearances," she said softly. "I photograph what's beneath." The words made Carlot feel exposed, not in an uncomfortable way, but in a way that made him want to believe someone could truly see him. For a few seconds, they stood there, time stretching between them. Then someone called Lena's name from across the hall, pulling her back to reality. She turned to leave, but glanced back at him one last time, her smile tinged with quiet mystery. "I think we'll meet again," she said, disappearing into the crowd before he could reply. Carlot remained frozen, his chest tightening with an unfamiliar feeling. He didn't know it yet, but one photograph, one fleeting moment, would change everything. A week after the exhibition, Carlot found himself standing in front of a small cafe along the Seine. The soft drizzle of Parisian rain left shimmering reflections on the cobblestone streets. He had never been the kind of man to meet someone once and then actively seek them out. But that night, Lena's eyes, her words, "I don't photograph appearances, I photograph what's beneath," stayed with him, lingering like an unfinished thought he couldn't shake. A tiny bell chimed as he stepped inside. The cafe was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee, its walls adorned with oil paintings bathed in golden light. Near the window, Lena sat sketching in her notebook. She looked up, recognition flickering across her face, followed by a small, knowing smile. "You came," she said, as if they had planned this all along. Carlot hesitated before sliding into the seat across from her. "How did you know I would?" Lena shrugged, setting her pencil down. "Some people, even if you only meet them once, you just know they'll find their way back." They talked, slowly, carefully, but genuinely. Carlot spoke about architecture, how he didn't just see buildings as structures but as stories, written in lines and light. He told her about his childhood, how he spent hours watching his father sketch blueprints, dreaming of one day creating something meaningful. Lena listened, her eyes bright with understanding. "You know," she said, "painting is a lot like architecture. It's not just lines and colors, it's how people feel the world. I've always thought that what I paint are stories too, just told in color instead of steel and glass." Carlot nodded, realizing she understood how he saw the world. Then Lena pulled out a small box and slid it across the table. "For you," she said simply. He opened it to find a tiny vintage camera pendant, exquisitely crafted, every detail carefully etched. Carlot frowned. "Why?" "Because you see the world differently," she said. "You don't need a camera to capture beauty, but I thought you should have something to remind you of that." He held the delicate gift in his palm, something tightening in his chest. No one had ever given him anything quite like this before. That night, as he walked away from the cafe, his fingers brushed against the pendant at his throat. And for the first time in a long time, he realized he was changing. As time passed, the connection between Carlot and Lena deepened. They were no longer just two strangers who had met at an art exhibition. They were two souls drawn to each other, discovering pieces of themselves in the other's presence. One evening, Carlot attended a charity circus gala, an event where he was invited as a major sponsor. Amid the dazzling performances, his attention was unexpectedly caught by Lena, not on stage but behind the curtains, her camera in hand. Unlike the audience, who marveled at the grand acrobatics and flamboyant costumes, Lena focused on the moments no one else noticed. The trembling hands of a young performer before his act, the nervous glances exchanged between trapeze artists, the quiet exhaustion in a clown's eyes when he thought no one was watching. Carlot stood at a distance watching her work, watching how she saw things that others didn't. "You thought a circus was just about performances, didn't you?" Lena's voice startled him. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Isn't it?" She smiled and handed him her camera. "Look through my lens." Carlot hesitated, then lifted the camera. What he saw was a world he had never paid attention to, the raw, unpolished emotions behind the illusion of perfection. Lowering the camera, he turned to her, a newfound admiration in his eyes. "You see the world differently." Lena tilted her head, her smile gentle. "So do you. You just don't realize it yet." For the first time, Carlot invited someone into his private space, not for business, not for social obligations, but because he wanted to. His apartment wasn't extravagant, but it was a sanctuary, filled with design sketches, scattered blueprints, and most notably, a hidden rooftop garden that he tended to himself. "You have a garden?" Lena asked, surprised, as he led her outside. Carlot nodded. "I spend my life designing steel and glass structures, but here everything is real, everything grows." She walked through the plants, running her fingers gently over the soft leaves. "You spend your days building the world, yet you find peace in the smallest things," she murmured. Carlot watched her, a realization settling in. She understood him in a way no one else ever had. That night, they cooked together in his kitchen. There were no elaborate candlelit dinners, no pretentious dishes, just handmade pasta, spilled flour, and laughter as Carlot accidentally knocked over half a bag of flour across the counter. For the first time, he wasn't performing. For the first time, he was simply himself. But their world was not an isolated bubble, safe from the expectations and judgments of others. One evening, Carlot received a call from Charlotte Sinclair, his mother. She demanded to see him immediately. He entered her elegant penthouse, knowing this conversation would not be an easy one. Charlotte set a newspaper down on the table. On the front page was a photo of Ethan and Lena at his apartment, the headline reading, "The Architect and His Muse, a Love That Doesn't Add Up?" Her voice was cool. "Did you really think this wouldn't attract attention?" Carlot met her gaze, unflinching. "I don't care what they say, I care about her." Charlotte exhaled sharply, standing to pour herself a drink. "If you truly care about her, then you won't let her life be destroyed." She turned, her piercing eyes locking onto his. "The media won't stop at this. The rumors will escalate. Do you think she can handle that?" A chill ran down Carlot's spine. "And if you insist on this relationship," Charlotte continued, her voice edged with steel, "I will not stand by and watch." This wasn't a threat, it was a promise. 2 weeks later, the phone rang, shattering the silence in Carlot's apartment. It was Margot, her voice urgent, almost breathless. "Carlo, you need to see this now." He clicked on the link she sent. On his screen, a video was spreading like wildfire across social media and news sites. In the footage, Lena sat across from a man at a cafe, leaning in slightly, her expression unreadable. And then, her voice rang out. "Carlot Sinclair? He's just a stepping stone. Who wouldn't want to be the muse of a genius?" A cold shiver ran down Carlot's spine. The comments beneath the video were relentless. "I knew she was just using him." Poor Carlo, fooled by a gold digger. Why would someone like him fall for someone like her? Carlot's grip on his phone tightened. He knew Lena. She would never say something like this. A second message from Margot popped up. "I found the original footage. Meet me now." In Margot's office, she played the security camera footage from the cafe. This time, Lena's actual words were clear. "I would never use Carlot. I love him." Carlot exhaled sharply, his mind spinning. His mother. "She did this," he muttered. "She twisted the truth. She turned Lena into a villain." Margot placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice softer now. "I know you love her, Carlot, but you need to act fast." Carlot rushed to Lena's studio, but when he arrived, the lights were off and the doors locked. His phone buzzed, a message from Lena. "Carlot, love isn't just about being together. Sometimes it's about knowing when to walk away. Your world and mine are too different. I won't be the weight that drags you down, nor will I watch my life be twisted by lies. You taught me to believe in beautiful things. I hope you find your own beauty too. Don't look for me, Lena." Carlot stood frozen. She was gone. But he would not let this be the end. Charlotte didn't even flinch when Carlot stormed into her office. She set down her teacup, meeting his glare with an air of practiced indifference. "What is it now, Carlot?" He threw the file onto her desk. "You did this. You destroyed Lena." Charlotte's expression didn't change. "I protected you. She doesn't belong in your world." Carlot laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, Mother, you weren't protecting me. You were protecting your illusion of control." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out an envelope, and placed it on the desk. "This is my resignation. I won't let you dictate my life another second." Charlotte's face went pale. "Carlot, you can't." His eyes held no hesitation. "I can, and I just did." Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked out, leaving behind the past he once thought he could never escape. Now, there was only one thing left to do. Find Lena Paris was vast, but Carlot knew exactly where to look. For days, he scoured the city, his determination unwavering, and then, finally, a small art gallery in Montmartre. Through the window, warm light spilled across a modest room. The scent of fresh paint filled the air. And there, seated before a canvas, carefully sketching her latest work, was Lena. He stepped inside. She froze, her hand halting mid-stroke, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Carlot." He didn't speak immediately. He simply moved closer, his heartbeat thundering in his chest. "You left without saying goodbye." His voice was rough with emotion. Lena swallowed hard, lowering her gaze. "I didn't want you to have to choose." Carlot stood directly in front of her now, his gaze steady, unwavering. "I've already chosen." He dropped to one knee. The velvet box opened, revealing a ring with an alexandrite stone, a rare gem that shifted color with the light, sometimes green, sometimes violet, always changing but never fading, just like their love. Lena's breath hitched, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth. Carlot smiled softly, his eyes filled with nothing but truth. "I love you, Lena, and I won't let my mother, the media, or anyone else decide our future. I want to build my life with you." He took a deep breath, voice steady. "Marry me." Lena stared at him for a long moment, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. Carlot squeezed her hand gently, eyes twinkling. "Then, don't ever leave again." A laugh escaped through her tears and she nodded, slipping her hand into his. Around them, applause erupted. Artists and visitors moved by the moment, unable to resist celebrating their love. Carlot pulled her into his arms, kissing her like there was no tomorrow. They had fought to find each other again, and this time they would never let go. The sun set over Paris, bathing the city in hues of gold and lavender. But for Ethan and Lena, the world had narrowed to this single moment, two hands intertwined, two hearts beating as one. They had found their way back to each other, and this time there would be no more running. A few months later, inside a sun-drenched vineyard in Provence, Lena adjusted the lace on her wedding gown, taking a deep breath as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Outside, the guests were already gathering beneath the canopy of olive trees, soft music floating through the air. Margot peeked into the dressing room, her face breaking into a warm smile. "Are you ready?" Lena exhaled, touching the vintage camera pendant at her throat, a reminder of where this journey had begun. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." Carlot stood at the altar, looking more at ease than ever. No tailored suits, no forced formalities, just a man in love, waiting for the woman who had changed everything. When Lena walked down the aisle, the world seemed to hold its breath. She wasn't just beautiful, she was radiant, an artist stepping into the most important masterpiece of her life. As she reached him, Carlot took both her hands in his voice steady, filled with conviction. "When I first met you, I saw the world through my own designs, through my own logic, but you," he smiled, his fingers tightening around hers, "you showed me how to see things differently, to find beauty in the imperfect." He took a breath. "I don't just love you, Lena, I see you, and I promise to never stop looking." Lena blinked back tears, then whispered, "I spent my life capturing fleeting moments, afraid they'd disappear. But with you, Carlot, I don't have to be afraid anymore, because you're my forever." The sun dipped behind the vineyards, casting them in golden light as they sealed their vows with a kiss. As the reception carried on, laughter, dancing, and the clinking of champagne glasses filling the air, Carlot led Lena away from the crowd to a quiet spot overlooking the rolling hills. He held out a small wrapped box. Lena raised an eyebrow. "Another gift?" Carlot smirked. "This one's different." She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a brand new camera, engraved with her initials. "But look at the back," Carlyle murmured. Lena turned it over. Engraved in delicate script were the words, "For all the moments we'll capture together." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked up at him. "We're going to build something beautiful together, Lena, in our work, in our life, and maybe someday," he added softly, placing a hand over hers, "in a family of our own." Lena's heart swelled. "Yes," she whispered, "let's capture every single moment." As the night deepened, Lena set up her new camera on a tripod, adjusting the settings one last time. "Come here," she said, pulling Carlot close. They stood under the fairy lights, the vineyard stretching behind them, the glow of their wedding still alive in the air. The timer clicked down. 3, 2, 1, flash. The final shot captured them wrapped in each other's arms, laughing under the stars. A perfect, unfiltered moment. Because some love stories aren't just written. Some love stories are captured, frame by frame, forever.